Welcome to the Futureneering Podcast. My name is Filip. The aim with this podcast is to highlight some of the incredible science, technology, and innovation happening in Australia, and some of the key individuals who are helping to build the future. This podcast is sponsored by Neurotec. Neurotec have created Enhance, Australia's most advanced and comprehensive nootropic formula. Enhance is a nootropic, or brain supplement, that combines 10 natural ingredients, including B vitamins, plant extracts, and amino acids to help support your mind each day. In particular, Enhance can help support and enhance your mental alertness, your focus and clarity, help maintain your nervous system health, and support your energy production. Enhance is also a listed medicine on the Australian Register of Therapeutic Goods. This means that it has been formulated, manufactured, and lab tested to some of the most stringent standards in the world. Neurotec also offers a 100-day, 100% money-back guarantee. So if Enhance doesn't work for you or you don't love it, you will get your money back. Listeners of this podcast can get 15% off today for Enhanced Nootropic by simply using the code Futureneering. Just visit www.neurotec.com.au and use the code Futureneering to get 15% off Enhanced Nootropic. On today's episode of the Futureneering Podcast, I am joined by Cameron Higgins. Cameron Higgins is the founder and CEO of Resonait Medical Technologies, a startup that is developing medical technologies to treat depression and mental health issues. Cameron initially completed a Bachelor of Electrical Engineering and Advanced Mathematics at the University of Sydney and has spent 8 years working in neuroscience, doing his PhD and postdoc at Oxford University. He is now on a mission to improve the lives of millions by incorporating wearable brain sensors and neuromodulation in one powerful device. If you're interested in neuroscience, building medical devices, solving mental health issues, technology, definitely listen to this episode, and I'm so excited to chat to Cameron. Cameron, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Futureneering Podcast.
My pleasure, Philip. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this chat. I just want to start with, can we just go over a bit about your journey and your experience, particularly studying through uni, and a bit about that journey from uni, your career, and where you are now?
Yeah, sure. So I'm somebody who I've spent a fair bit of time at uni now, but it's been, I guess, quite a... nobody really has linear career paths these days, but I've really jumped around quite a bit. So I guess if we start back, I did my undergrad here in Sydney Uni. Was one of those people who couldn't decide what I wanted to do. I actually just wanted to study everything, and eventually, it's a good thing in Australia we do these double degrees, right? So if you can't choose, you can at least get two in. So I went with Engine Science, which was a whole lot of fun for about 5 years, and I really got hooked towards the end of it when we, at the end of an engineering degree, you start to do a research project.
Yeah. And
that's where, you study a whole lot of theory up until that point, and then my research project, I was playing with EEG devices, which is where you record the electrical potential from a person's scalp and try to understand what's actually going on in their brain. Understand what's going on in their brain is one of the applications of that. I was using it to try to detect people's emotional responses. And I don't know, it was just kind of fascinating. You open a door onto something so complex.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But then there's relatively simple in terms of just popping some electrodes on your scalp that you can start to get a handle over these things. So, yeah, that's where I guess my fascination with neuroscience started. But I did then put it on hiatus. I was planning to go and do a PhD in the Northern Hemisphere, and at some point, opportunity popped up for a short volunteer contract with the UN. What was meant to be short was meant to be about 6 months, working as a software developer, developing these emergency preparedness programs for them. And as sometimes happens, one thing led to another, and 6 months turned into a kind of 5-year series of projects.
Wow.
Starting off as a software guy, and then moving into emergency preparedness, and then emergency response and operations management, doing all kinds of things and working on some pretty high-profile international emergencies. This was all with the World Food Programme, so trying to get aid into areas where it was really needed. And that was a fairly intense job, to put it mildly. And after 5 years, there was a point where I thought, God, if I'm ever going to do this PhD, it better be now. And luckily enough, then I was accepted into Oxford, and so wound up continuing a PhD in neuroscience at that point. And then it was kind of a 5-year path of PhD, postdoc, as I just learnt more and more about what we can say about brain networks from these non-invasive recordings. So all of that has effectively led me to where I am now. A year ago, I decided to leave academia and actually try to build my own device, to use that knowledge to actually have some benefit in the mental health space.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. How did you, so when you were at University of Sydney, you were doing electrical engineering, you said science. Were you doing neuroscience then, or was it just broad?
No, actually, I was doing maths. That was my passion. So I guess I spent a lot of time looking at methods and maths and how to analyze things before I really got my hands dirty and got into the actual applications.
Yeah. Did you find, was it easy sort of going from having that electrical engineering background to doing the PhD in neuroscience? Because you were focusing on brain-computer interfaces, and that's pretty much just electrical engineering, right?
Sort of. Like, I would say that I, more than many people who do this, I got quite into the neuroscience. And I think it's easier to go that way. I think things like engineering and maths are sort of building blocks, foundational knowledge where, you can't start learning third year engineering if you haven't done first and second year. That's not necessarily the case for a lot of science topics and neuroscience topics. It always helps to have the background, but sometimes you can just bite off a small piece and understand that in isolation, which is a lot harder to do with engineering, I think.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. That's super interesting. So now you've started the startup called Resonait, focusing on brain-computer interface devices, a type of medical device. Is this company based on research you were doing when you were doing your PhD and postdoc?
It is. So it uses some of that research, but also it takes it in quite a new direction. So my research was all about identifying which brain networks are activating based on these recordings. So quick primer on what we know from neuroscience. Really just in the last 20 years, this kind of network perspective has evolved where rather than focusing on an individual area of the brain, which was traditionally what was done, what does this part of the brain do, what does that part of the brain do, we now know that areas of the brain activate together in these giant networks. And so I was really focused on how we could identify those networks based on external recordings.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right, so let's dive deep into Resonait and everything you're doing and your progress so far. How has it been starting a startup? Has it been exciting, terrifying, all of the above?
Yeah, pretty much. If I had to summarize it, that'd probably be it. It's a bit of a step off into the unknown. It's been a lot of fun as well, right? It's if you enjoy a challenge and you like being in a space where things could scale and really take off, but there's also the pressure because they could flop and you're out of a job and out of business. Now, I feel like those two things together, you've got to like both of them. It's like that's the pressure cooker that kind of keeps you going. And comparing to, like, I guess what I'm doing at this point, it's commercial, still fairly research focused, but commercializing research. And the difference for me, I could spend the next 20 or 30 years in a research lab trying to solve every little problem and delve deeper and deeper. Whereas when you take a commercial lens, you have to prioritize and figure out the big things first. And push things, it really kind of funnels towards something that's actually an application rather than what can just be an endless pursuit of more knowledge and more deeper understanding of something.
Yeah, absolutely. And are you on the path to building a prototype, or have you already built a prototype?
Yeah, so I've got a prototype now, which is really very exciting for me. This is about a month old. So for a long time it was under development, and it's a really good feeling the moment you have something that you can really start testing and start playing around with, because that's when you start learning things quite quickly and pivoting. And so basically a month ago got my first prototype using EEG, an off-the-shelf EEG product in my own software, and we got kind of 30 people through some usability tests, and based on that we've got just spun out our second software iteration. So you start to identify things really quickly that are really useful, quick wins, and then there's the longer term tech that you've got to solve at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have a team at the moment? Is it just you? And have you gotten any funding, or tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so it's been mostly me. At the moment, I have a few good partnerships that are really helping. And I think in the early stage startup world, a team can be built up of external partners until you're in a position to really kind of bring people in full time, which I'm not yet. But I've got a great partnership with the Black Dog Institute on the research side. And then I've got a great partnership with CSIRO more on the technical focus side. So somebody from the CSIRO that's working for me 2 days a week now. And then you've got to kind of cover all of these bases. So the kind of the clinical, Black Dog, the tech, CSIRO. I've then got somebody who's a kind of neuroscience consultant, as well as a medical industry and regulatory consultant. So that's kind of like the team that's rounding it out at the moment. But it's for the last year, it's mostly been me trying to put it all together.
Yeah, amazing. So in terms of, let's talk about a bit, like, what problem are you trying to solve exactly with this technology, and how do you think this technology will help solve that problem?
Yeah, so look, broadly speaking, depression is a huge problem and one that isn't going away. It's one that, it's one of these illnesses. I don't really need to say so much about it because everybody has, if not their own personal experience, then they know somebody close to them who suffered from it. It really is that prevalent. But what a lot of people don't realise is basically because the prevalence of depression has been growing at a faster rate than we've been able to, it's basically double the rate that we've been able to train professionals in the mental health space. So the demand, when you look at Medicare stats for psychology sessions, has just been kind of growing like this. Meanwhile, the people who actually provide that care, it's growing, but not at the same rate. And so there's just this kind of bottleneck. And it's really, I think, quite a problem when you have, by the time that people reach out to the mental health system for help, normally, people are quite reluctant and slow to do that. So normally they're quite advanced by that point. And if, reaching out is a big kind of step for a lot of people, if the system then just gives them the runaround, sorry, psychologists are booked out, can't get in to see anybody, just here, maybe look at an app and come back to us in 3 months. Like, this is what people are actually being told. So I think the problem for me is really, how can we get care to people faster than what we're actually doing? And that's where I see a real role for technology, because you can kind of augment a lot of what the mental health system does through using advanced technology. So in my case, it's a wearable device that sits on a person's head, this kind of EEG device that helps. You can think of it sort of like a coaching system that helps people to, through monitoring and feeding back to them, helps them to change their kind of thinking habits effectively. Okay, so it's related to psychology. This is part of what psychologists do, and we're hoping that this can really help psychologists so that they can really get the most out of their face time with clients, but also space out that the visit schedule to alleviate a bit of capacity and give people something that they can do each day in the meantime, so they're not just twiddling their thumbs waiting for the next available appointment.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, yeah, essentially you're sort of, people with depression and other mental health conditions, you're essentially creating this device to allow them to sort of measure their brain waves and their brain activity, and I guess use this form of neurofeedback, so a form of training to, I guess, know when they're in these states and then learn how to get themselves out of these states based on what they see.
Yeah, I'd say that's a good summary. And it's the link between this and neuroscience is based on what we actually know about networks. So there's specific networks that we can target that we know are linked to the illness, that we know are linked to rumination and self-reflective thought and all of the subjective thinking patterns that kind of typify our understanding of depression. So helping people to kind of break those habits.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think technology like this is definitely needed. I would say, yeah, mental health and the brain in general is probably one of the most important things probably to be working on and focusing on, especially in current society. Does seem to be trending upwards, which is unfortunate. So, yeah, we do need solutions, more and more solutions, like the one you're building and providing, which is great. So people probably have heard of EEG before. There's a bunch of consumer products on the market, and I'm a user of one. I've got one here. So,
oh yeah, which one? The Muse.
The Muse headband. So
yeah.
If people listening to this, they probably won't see it, but it's essentially, it's an EEG headband, which is, their use case is primarily for meditation and sort of helping you use this form of neurofeedback to help you get into that calm state. I have my own opinions and thoughts on it and how accurate it is and how well it works. What would you say is sort of the difference between a device like this and something you're building? And is the Muse and similar consumer grade EEGs, are they really that useful or accurate?
Yeah, so look, I guess in some ways I'll reserve my opinion on that because I've got a few of these devices that I'm testing out at the moment. And maybe the other thing to say, there's like this huge range. EEG really just refers to putting any kind of sensor on your scalp. So when you look at it that way, there are headbands that have a single sensor that monitor activity in one spot, and then there's clinical grade EEG, these caps that go on that have up to 128 different electrodes. And an electrode can be something really simple and cheap. It can be something kind of gold-plated. It can be something that requires gel. So there's this enormous complexity and variability from one to the other. Now, I think that the consumer-grade ones, what I will say is that obviously where they're the Muse band in particular, I think is really good for comfort and usability. And absolutely, a lot of this... Yeah, exactly. So it's designed for people to sleep. Like a lot of the clinical grade ones, you couldn't really put your head down with them because you've got wires going everywhere. So there's so many of these trade-offs, and I think each of these devices are optimized for some kind of space within that. So, I am testing these all out, but I'm expecting that none of the existing consumer-grade EEG devices will tick all of the boxes for me. We'll see, maybe, but I'm expecting to go down the path of designing one that kind of for the space that I'm going into and all of the requirements that has.
Yeah. And is the device you're developing, is that going to be for at-home use or use inside clinics or?
Yeah, so we're targeting home use.
Okay.
So home use, the idea is that people can, when they first go to see a psychologist, they can take this device home with them and use it for half an hour each day. So they have a kind of half-hour training session each day over that intervening period in between their visits back to the psychologist.
Yeah, that's amazing. What do you see as sort of the future of this technology? Can it get more advanced? What is it going to look like in the near future?
Well, I mean, I think the future of neurotech is going to be very interesting. Like, neurotech almost didn't exist a few years ago, and it's one of these areas that is evolving really rapidly. There's a lot of companies coming up with a lot of quite innovative ideas and devices, and you've got right up to things like Elon Musk's Neuralink. When you start talking about implantable devices, I think we're getting towards the point where we can start to understand the complexity of brain signals. I don't think we'll ever fully get there, but we're starting to have the tools that we can actually draw more out of them and actually relate them to use cases in a way that we were never able to before. So I think things are going to look very different over a kind of 5 to 10 year horizon. Very hard to say exactly which things are going to work and won't, but there's definitely going to be some tech that really disrupts the way that illnesses are treated.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be very interesting because right now it seems like neuroscience and psychiatry is very subjective, qualitative, and we don't really know that much. So it'll be nice to get some tools, some diagnostics to actually really measure what's going on, learn more about the brain, learn how it relates to all these different mental conditions. I think it's going to be an exciting time as we uncover the mysteries of the mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think psychiatrists, would... they've been trying to quantify a lot of this stuff for a very long time. One of the things that's interesting is that the qualitative stuff really does have value as well. And I think the real benefit is when you can bring those things together. For these subjective illnesses, you've got to have both.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to ask, what other tools and technologies do you think are going to be promising for treating these mental health issues? Is it just going to be these devices, or are there other things out there that you think look really interesting and promising? So
there's quite a lot happening in the industry at the moment. You may have seen, like in the drug development space, the TGA has really kind of is at the forefront of deregulating a lot of psychedelic drugs that have enormous potential for treatment. So I think that's an area where we're going to see a lot of movement. I think there's possibly at this point, there's that kind of hype curve, and there's the risk with a lot of mental health stuff. One thing that we've learned is that there's never a silver bullet. There's no perfect solution. And so I think over time we'll come to understand exactly which profiles of conditions and cases respond best to these different treatments. But I'd say psychedelics is probably where there's been the most innovation recently. Some of the others, there's also, I think, just in digital health, a heap of stuff that's coming out. These days there's an app for everything, but there are some really good, simple solutions to some of these problems. So, when I was talking before about a lot of the strain in the mental health care system it's kind of a systems issue about availability and people being able to reach psychologists. So just in the last few years, a bunch of online platforms where you can access a psychologist almost anywhere in the world have really changed that. So, access for people in rural Australia, there's, relatively simple pieces of tech compared to some of the more invasive neurotech devices that have the potential to have a huge impact. So,
yeah, I think even like all this technology and these devices and psychedelics look pretty promising. But even just some of the basics, I think a lot of people aren't doing, which could have drastic effects, such as, proper nutrition, sleeping properly, getting the right amount of sleep, exercising, meditation, things like that. I think are definitely worth it as well.
Absolutely, and that holistic approach, like a lot of the evidence, when I said one thing we know really well is that there's no silver bullet, another thing we know really well is that more than one approach has this kind of like 1 + 1 = 3 effect. So it's not doing A or B, but generally doing A and B, you're way more likely to see results. When you talk about the simpler things, the kind of lifestyle issues, there's a lot of ways that you can boost that. It's probably more in the kind of mild cases that is has the most effect, but absolutely, there's they're the kind of the relatively easier wins where you can have a much more scalable impact, right?
Yeah, definitely like the low-hanging fruit, I guess. Sort of like take care of that, and then if it's still a problem, then look at these more potent solutions.
Yeah. I might just add, because it's important, like when we talk about mental health, I think the mental health and mental illness can be quite different things. So the things that keep us healthy aren't necessarily the things that will get us back to health once people have kind of really fallen into a ditch with a particular issue. So it's another reason why you have all of these different strategies, and I think the challenge is figuring out which ones work for which people at which point.
Yeah, it's almost personalized in a way. Everyone's different too, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you have any ideas or theories, I guess, like do you believe that mental health and mental illness issues are rising? And if so, do you have any ideas why you think that may be?
So the evidence says that they are increasing in prevalence. Now, whether that is an increase in the diagnoses or an increase in the actual baseline in the population, I'd say it's probably a bit of both. Because when I talk about the increase in diagnoses, one thing that I think we have done really well is reduce the stigma. It's still there. I was saying before, there's still large portions of society that are very reluctant to admit when there's a problem and go out and get help, but people are more willing, I think, now than they have been in the past. So it's hard to, I think, distinguish sometimes what is behind these numbers. My best guess would be that it's a bit of both. I think that kind of the pressures of the modern world and the way that we work also has a tendency to. I wouldn't be surprised if that's behind increases in anxiety and depression, and kind of modern workday pressures. But
yeah, it seems like we're sort of just constantly trying to do more, get more out of ourselves. It's just the stress is just nonstop. We're just trying to be productive and advance, and yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm reminded of somebody saying, I think when email first came out, it was kind of said, imagine how much more free time everybody's going to have. Didn't quite work out that way.
No. Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot that can be said about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now that you're in sort of the medical device space, brain-computer interfaces, do you see any other opportunities for entrepreneurs or scientists that want to get into sort of that space that, they could look at building solutions for? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's the startup space in Australia is really healthy. It's not to say that it's an easy road and people should go in with their eyes wide open, but I think over the past 5 or 6 years, just the growth in venture capital and the growth in, I think, business attitudes as well towards startups, people just have a lot more confidence and a lot more willing to back what is an early stage. There is risk involved. There's a much higher risk compared to later stage companies, but the overall ecosystem is way more supportive, and there is a lot of support there. I've come through multiple accelerator programs, which have been really useful for me to go from being a kind of academic to knowing how to actually turn an idea into a company, into a business. So there's a lot of support out there, and I'd encourage anybody who's on the fence and thinking about it, like I say, go in with your eyes wide open, but it's quite a rocket ship ride. I'd recommend it to anyone.
Yeah, I think a lot of people on the outside who just have like a normal job, they've never been in the startup space, don't really realize the amount of support there is. It's really crazy that we're living in a time where, there's all those accelerator programs, as you said, there's government grants, there's venture capitalists who are willing to invest in these ideas. And there's just so much support for startups and people who are wanting to take that risk to build something useful.
Exactly. And I think, that's, it's a wonderful thing. At the same time, it's like going into the startup world, you've got to be ready to do it all yourself as well. So if you're somebody who enjoys that, then go for it.
Yeah, it's a lot of hard work, but it can definitely be worth it, I guess, especially if it's like your calling to just like solve this issue.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you have any words of advice for entrepreneurs who are starting out and maybe they want to build a technology company? Before you started your journey, what would you tell them?
Yeah. What would I tell them before I'd started my journey? Or
yeah, what would you tell someone who was in your shoes before you started everything?
Right. I think so. One of the mistakes that a lot of people make is, and I made this mistake as well, is engineers are great at coming up with solutions for problems that don't exist. With some cool tech, and then go and find a business case. And I think it can work. People always bash that. You can eventually find a business case, but you need to, I think, start with the idea that your tech is going to evolve very rapidly. I.e., you're not going to find, there aren't problems out there that are just the perfect fit and you just plonk something into it. You start with an idea, and it's good that you've got a good technical idea, but it needs to change. You need to really iterate and adjust things on the basis of actual market feedback. So I guess overall my advice would be do it, but don't trust yourself. Go out and get feedback, and if anything, you should be overcorrecting for the feedback that you get early on. You should assume that that you've misread things, that you're misguided, that you're off here, and what people are saying, you need to get there. That'd be my general advice, I think.
Yeah. And do you think, say you see a problem that you think needs to be solved, do you think, you need to have a technical background, like an engineering or science background to solve that? Like, say if you wanted to create a medical device, do you need to have a formal education in biology, biotech, biomed, or what are your thoughts there?
It definitely helps. It's not an absolute necessity. And I think, there's plenty of people who can pull it off without a technical background, but that's because they then surround themselves with technical people. So I think at the end of the day, like, anything is possible, provided you build the team around you, you're aware of what you don't know, and you find the people to round that out. Can a non-technical person just go it alone and build a technical product? No, I wouldn't recommend it.
Be painful journey.
Yeah, exactly. Be a great way to learn, but you probably wouldn't get anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah.
I might also say that the opposite is true as well, that technical people should try to surround themselves with business people and market people and clinical people who can, in terms of that journey from I've got this cool idea to finding, actually I need to solve this problem, and they're vaguely related, but I now need to get that over there. You always need to round out what you can't do, and in something like medtech, there's going to be a lot of things you can't do, no matter who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have any words of advice or something you would tell your younger self, just in general, knowing what you know now?
Probably not. I mean, kind of learned everything I did by making mistakes and being a bit of an idiot. I could tell myself what the right thing was to do, but then I would never have learnt it. So probably not. If I met my younger self, I'd just stand back and laugh, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, here's an interesting question, which I want to know.
Yep.
So do you think in order to sort of be successful and get where you are today, did you simply follow your curiosity, or did you strategize all this and plan all this ahead of time?
Definitely the former. So, like, coming back to the start where I said I had a kind of non-linear path of jumping from one thing to another, it was always following something, being a bit opportunistic about what was in front of me. So, I had a plan to go and do a PhD that got sidetracked by 5 or 6 years of project work with the UN because, there were just things that you don't get offers like that. And I think it doesn't mean you shouldn't have some kind of plan and direction in your career, but you don't need a kind of 20-year career plan. That's not helpful, I don't think, to anybody. Have a direction. And then the direction can change based on the things that come up. But that's probably more what I've been doing.
Yeah, I find that interesting because I think I find myself too often like setting these big goals out in the future and I spend too much time thinking rather than doing. And I think it's easy to get to over strategize and get overwhelmed by these big goals rather than just like doing what you're passionate about and curious about like today and just taking these small steps. I think a lot of people probably have that problem as well.
Yeah, totally. So when some of the emergency work that I did, there was planning was what happened after 10 p.m. and the whole day was just kind of frantic running around. And then, 10 p.m., 11, 12 was when you got to actually go, oh, what are we going to do tomorrow?
Yeah.
And it's important, you've got to do it, but it was also normally by about 7 a.m. that plan had gone out the window and everything had changed. We were frantically scrambling for the rest of the day as well. So you need to do it, and it's important. But like you say, you've got to balance that out with the actual execution, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any habits outside of your work to sort of stay healthy, high performing, and especially look after your mental health personally?
Yeah, so lately, you're catching me at the end of summer. Lately, I've been a bit sloppy, but normally I would, I guess, have be a member of a gym. In the past, I used to be a member of a few different kind of team sports, whether it was rugby or rowing. So things that I find I need a kind of social element as well for my my mental health, as well as the activity side of it. So there's definitely been times where I've noticed things deteriorating and going, okay, time to course correct. And typically that would be through just committing to an exercise regime more than anything.
Yeah, I think especially like running a startup, it's obviously can be very stressful and demanding on your time. You probably have to find certain ways to unwind and recharge and all those things as well.
Yeah, one of the other things that I've found, there are perks to running a startup as well, that you are your own boss. So you can also, and I do, there are times where I go, okay, this isn't working. I'm going to have a break now. And in ways that you can't necessarily do in many other jobs. So you can look after yourself at the same time.
Yeah, I love that sort of having your own schedule, I guess, but you have to be within reason. Obviously, you still have to get all the work done.
Exactly. Unfortunately,
yeah. Awesome. This is one of my favorite questions to ask, but are you an avid reader at all? Do you read any books?
Yeah, intermittently. I go through periods of reading heaps and then periods where I don't.
Yeah. Do you have any favorites you could recommend?
Right. So I do. They're probably quite well known. I think so. Two of my favourites would be similar vein: Sapiens and Guns, Germs, and Steel. So I don't know, the kind of books that can try to give you, and you've got to take it with a grain of salt, right? But a book that tries to tell you the reasons behind all of human history in 200 pages. They both do a pretty good job, as hard a challenge as that is. So yeah, they'd be my favourites. I'd probably have to say Lord of the Rings as well, because
nice.
I'm a bit of a nerd at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a massive fiction reader, but I love Lord of the Rings. Well, the movies at least. So
yeah.
Fantastic. All right, so sort of final question I like to ask before we wrap it up. What is your vision of the future? So in terms of sort of like your personal vision of the future, what do you want to see? And also, I guess, for your company as well, what is your vision there for the future?
Yeah, so that's interesting. I tend to avoid trying to look into the crystal ball too much in terms of what the future will be like for us all. But I think, what I guess it's going to be a continuation of many of the trends that we see today. So we are living, I think, in a really interesting time. ChatGPT and things are kind of like hammering that message home that things are going to look quite different in a few years. There's going to be a lot more activities and interactions that are done that don't have humans behind them. There's kind of human input that bots have been trained on, but they're really augmenting things and in many ways replacing a lot of human interactions in ways that I think it's going to be an interesting process. There'll be a fair bit of fumbling along, and I imagine a few interesting stuff-ups along the way.
Yeah.
But so that's, I guess, if that's my kind of my crystal ball vision of the future. I think for the company, like I said, I can see neurotech being a huge thing in the next few years. I think, mental health, unfortunately, isn't a problem that is going away on its own. It's getting worse. And this is an area where, when we talk about all these AI tools and so on, we can actually use it to help us manage the stuff that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And that's pretty much what I want my company to do. So, looking towards the future, I think you'll have not just, I'm having a tough time, what do? I go see a GP, might get some pills to throw at it, might get a referral to a psychologist who I might be able to make an appointment with. There'll be a much broader kind of array of tools that people can turn towards, and Resonait, I hope, will be one of those in a very big way. So,
yeah, amazing. Yeah, well, that is a powerful vision, a powerful mission. I hope more entrepreneurs and scientists and engineers sort of follow your path to help create these awesome solutions for big problems in modern society. Super important. So I'm super pumped to see how you go with it all and to see your progress unfold over the next few years. So it'll be super interesting. And I wish you all the best. If anyone wants to contact you or learn more about you or your company, where can they go to find out that?
Yeah, great. So firstly, thanks very much. Been a pleasure. And if anybody wants to get in touch, hit me up on LinkedIn, so Cam Higgins, or my website is resonait.com. Resonait spelt Resonait. So hit me up, get in touch. I'd love to hear from you.
Amazing. I'm sure there's some eager, ambitious engineers out there who want to help you on your journey, and
I hope so.
Startup.
Definitely get in touch.
Yeah, awesome. Anyways, I'll let you go. Thanks so much for your time, Cameron. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. It's been great to learn more about you and your business. And I wish you all the best.
Fantastic. Thanks heaps, Philip.
Thanks, mate. Have a great night.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.